Welcome back to the Slow Magic Challenge. This is day 10. Today I want to map out kind of where this teaching falls in the context of my broader work because it's here on purpose. So I want to share with you something that I call the Whole and Wild Way, and it's basically the entire scope of my work in Whole and Wild. So it starts with the reality that you were created good. And then as the human story unfolds in your life, you have an encounter, right? So life happens, relationships, culture, expectations, joy, pain, loss, misattunement, love. And in that reality, belonging matters, right? And so you wisely adapt your body and your spirit, your being, know how to adapt in order to sustain belonging, right? Your nervous system protects what is precious, not because you're broken, but because you're designed for survival. And then that adaptation eventually becomes a protective pattern, right? It actually forms and shapes you into a particular kind of person, right? Our habits and practices form and shape us. And so what once protected you slowly starts to actually organize your life, and you begin to perform belonging instead of experiencing it. So this is where what I call the sacred disruption happens. And that's actually what this challenge is positioned as. It's a sacred disruption point. Because at this point, something feels too small for you. Something feels off. Like the place you are can't quite contain the fullness of you, right? Like the identity you've built up to this point isn't true to the fullness of who you were made to be. And it's itchy. Like there are parts of you that notice that. There's restlessness that takes place in this. Life interrupts the protective pattern. And that's actually a really beautiful thing, right? Because the old way isn't working anymore. And something true begins asking to emerge. So that's part of what we're doing here is we're disrupting the way that we have believed transformation is supposed to take place. And we're recognizing that there's another way that we can do this. Because at this point, it can feel really frustrating when you know there's more and you're trying to use these fast transformation methods, but they're just not working, right? And so I want to invite you into a practice throughout this challenge that says presence is actually the way forward, right? And presence takes courage and it takes rewiring. And so I want to come back to the Whole and Wild Way for a second, because after sacred disruption, I have two main points that is in the scope of my work. It's reclamation, which is beginning to listen again to the parts that we exiled when we were adapting, right? And welcoming them home, untangling the knot in the rope, sourcing down instead of sourcing out, and recognizing like it's time for me to reclaim the fullness of who I am. And then part two of that is rhythm. So we talked about how our habits and practices form and shape us into certain kinds of people. And it's the same thing going forward. We don't stop practicing who we're becoming, right? But the truth is, reclamation is only truly successful if you also create a life that can welcome what you've reclaimed, right? So if you reclaim something, but your life does not welcome in that part of you, it's not sustainable. And so the second piece of this is rhythm, new practices, new boundaries, new relationships with yourself, with the world, with the environment, new ways of living. Life begins to organize around what has returned, right? And so recognizing that all of you gets to belong and we get to create a space that is sustainable for that. So the reclamation and the rhythm part are actually what live inside of my Rewilded coaching experience. And I'll come back to that. But then all of this, as you've heard me say, is aimed towards presence. So like the ultimate goal, the purpose of this work is presence, is actually getting to step into a life where you don't escape your 3D reality, where you're not escaping what is, but you're inhabiting it, right? And when you do that, when you can show up richly and fully in what is here, offering your full self and responding to what's available to you, what naturally comes from that is radiant authority. The light of your soul resonates out, reverberates out, and offers the world something that only uniquely you can give. And it changes everything around you. So, for 9 days now, we've been walking that same ground. We've been navigating the myth of fast magic, the patterns that made sense once we understood why our nervous system built them, the practicing that's been quietly shaping who you're becoming, one repetition at a time. And then this past week, the old way starting to break. So noticing where you'd been outsourcing your power, getting specific yesterday about your own actual recipe for aliveness in your own actual words. And I want to just come back and say that none of this was 9 separate lessons. It's what has been pointing towards the whole time is this reclamation of the parts of you that your life at some point taught you to put into exile, to cast out. Not because those parts were doing wrong, but because exile was how you survived. That was what the protective pattern was. It's something wise doing its job for as long as its job is needed, right? And so here's the question that I want to ask you today. Not who do you want to become? Like there's a stranger out there that you need to go find or invent, but something closer to this. Who is it then? Not the idea of her, the specific, textured, particular her, the one who's been trying to enter the landscape of your life this whole time. Who is she? So sit with that for a moment before you go on. Whatever arises, even if it's one word, one image, one sentence, that's what we're going to work with today. And there's a word that's kind of sitting right at the center of the fast magic narrative that we haven't named directly yet, even though it's kind of been in the room the whole time. And it's the word manifestation. So back on day 8, we talked about instant manifestation right there on the fast magic list, next to the hacks and the rescue and the overnight identity. And today I want to kind of pull that word back out and actually look at it, because manifest literally means to make visible what is hidden. That's the actual definition. And I believe in that completely, without irony. Your capacity to conceive of what does not yet exist and call it forward into your real 3-dimensional life, that's not woo. That's one of the most astonishing things about being human. What I want to challenge isn't manifestation. It's the fast magic version that was sold to us. The one where the right words, the right vision board, the right formula guarantees the outcome on your timeline, with the surrender and the process and the not yet edited out entirely. That version isn't manifestation. It's outsourcing, but it's wearing a nicer word. A couple of years ago, I was sitting in a teaching and I was reminded of a practice, something like the one that I'm about to teach you today. And in that moment, I flashed straight back to something that I'd heard a decade earlier from a Franciscan priest when he was describing a method of healing prayer that he had developed over decades of his own practice. And something about the two teachings kind of clicked together to me, and I've spent the past couple of years just developing my own integration of both. And it served me more deeply in my own practice than any other manifestation practice that I've tried, precisely because of what it refuses to skip. This prayer and manifestation practice honors both things at the same time: your real capacity to conceive of what doesn't yet exist and call it forward, and the reality of surrender, presence, and process that most manifestation practices completely bypass. That's the shape we're about to draw. Here's a simple shape to hold that desire in so that it doesn't stay in an abstract feeling and become something that you can actually work with. So I want to invite you to just draw a triangle on a piece of paper. And once you've drawn the triangle, there are 4 parts to it. So the desire is the top part. That's the desire that you just named, not a 5-year plan, the actual specific textured shape of who is asking to come back into the landscape of your life. The right side is your part, the things that are genuinely yours to do. Not everything, just what's actually within your reach. An action, a boundary, a conversation, a practice. Name 2 or 3, maybe even 4 or 5, but I would stick to that number, at least for the first round of going through this triangle practice. The right side is what you surrender. The timing, the outcome, how it unfolds, what other people do with it. Naming this isn't giving up. It's telling the truth about what was never yours to control in the first place. So stop spending your power there. And the base is where you're actually starting from today. No editing required. Not where you wish you were, but where you actually are. Once your triangle is drawn, sit with it. This is the whole practice. Naming the desire honestly, claiming what's yours, and releasing what isn't. And then taking responsibility, energetic responsibility for the parts that are yours. So showing up in these ways, not showing up, spending your power, wishing you could control the other side, but legitimately investing yourself in what is yours to do. So I want to tell you something today, and I am really excited to share, as I did earlier, a little bit about the Rewilded coaching experience. And again, that's the place where reclamation and rhythm are actually going to take place. So it's the place where we do the full work of welcoming back what your life taught you to exile. It's the next turn of the same spiral that we've been walking together this week. It's not a different path. It's the same one, taking you, basically saying like, okay, if transformation happens differently than I've believed, then how does that look in my life, right? That's what Rewilded is about. It happens in 2 parts. So the first is the individual identity work. It's the actual welcoming home of what's been in exile. And that's done over a season of presence together between you and me. And then the second work is the embodied reordering. And that's actually building the actual rhythms and structure of a life where what you've reclaimed can finally really belong. Not a life that you have to keep forcing it into, but a life that's actually built to hold it. And so I wanted to just share that applications are open starting today, and they close Sunday, August 30th. So there's a link in the email. And if any questions come up as you sit with this, I just want to invite you to hit reply to your email, and I will absolutely read it and reply it myself. Thank you so much for being here, especially today.